information that has come for information. There's information new information, additional information.
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting. I want to make sure that
You're like
everything
a doctor.
is good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no clothes. Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women. And so I sort of get away with things like that.
Mr. President, what did Jeffrey Epstein mean in his emails when he said you knew about the girls?
I know nothing about that. They would have announced that a long time ago. It's really, what did he mean when he spent all the time with Bill Clinton, with the president of Harvard, that is Summers? You got to find out, what did he know with respect to Bill Clinton, with respect to the head of Harvard, with respect to all of those people that he knew, including J.P. Morgan Chase.
Sir,
Yeah,
if
Jennifer,
there's
go ahead.
nothing incriminating in the file, sir, why are you acting as if...
Quiet, begin.
Hello and welcome to Faux News. I'm your host, Bo Hughes. With the Epstein saga continuing, I wanted to go over a few things quickly as some of the information that has come out in the past weeks. I think it is time to do so. Let's see. The first place to begin, I believe, is a good analogy here is the movie The Pelican Brief. It's a great movie. It's based on a John Grisham book, and it, in a nutshell, is basically about a law student played by Julia Roberts that sort of unwittingly stumbles upon an elaborate scheme orchestrated from the White House. And that scheme is the murder of several Supreme Court justices because they all had a connection in their past to, I believe it was a real estate dealing, some sort of shady business dealing that the president was involved in decades before, and he wanted traces of his connection to that eliminated by killing these justices and replacing them. I believe, after looking at some of the things that have come out, particularly the Steve Bannon connection, and some other things I'll get to in a minute, that is what is going on with Trump and Epstein. For a long time, I was pretty much agnostic on this topic. I believe that Trump obviously had very obvious, let's call it, social ties and connections to Epstein, but like many people, I kind of wrote that off to the fact that, well, he was a New York socialite, a Palm Beach socialite, and their paths crossed as people in those types of super elite wealthy networks generally do. And, there wasn't much to that. I reached that conclusion largely by the fact that with all the looking into Epstein and all the investigation and everything, that no one came forward concretely linking Trump to any sort of illegal, immoral, depraved activity with Epstein. And this despite the witch hunt that was perpetrated against him for years by people on the left. So, that being said, I have done a 180 on this and reached a different conclusion. I started trending this way back in the summertime when the initial uproar about the DOJ saying they were not going to release these files came about, at which point I came across a lot of these bizarre interviews and sound bites that Trump has given over the years with things about his comments made about his daughter Ivanka and young girls in particular. Paris Hilton comment on the Howard Stern show is another weird one. Types of things that, quite frankly, a man that is attracted to developed women simply does not say. They were very alarming and disturbing, but I didn't really know what to do with them in terms of implications for the whole Epstein matter at the time. That was back in the summer. Then about 2 weeks ago, and I feel a little bit bad about being so ignorant on this topic, as someone that feels that they're relatively versed on the whole Epstein thing and stays up to date on things. I came across the Katie Johnson allegations from 2016. Now, back in 2016, I was not paying nearly as much attention to the news as I do now. Nevertheless, it seems as though there was a very successful effort to bury this, because I only came across it myself in the last few weeks, and it's interesting if you go on YouTube. Um, Her interview that she gave in February of 2016, ostensibly, uh, everything tied to her was either posted in just the last few months or going back 9 years to when the initial allegations came out in 2016. So, at the very least, I would have kind of expected these allegations to resurface at the time of the 2020 election, but it appears that they did not. Um, that being said, going over that case, watching her interview, the allegations that were made, I believe her. I think it is a huge red flag, obviously, that she came forward with these allegations 3.5 years before Epstein was finally brought in by the feds and the general public had any idea who he was. That's a huge red flag. It's also a red flag that she came out with these accusations in February of 2016, which was even before the first presidential primaries, and Trump was still an outside candidate at that point, and yet she came forward. I also think that it's very plausible that she was receiving real legitimate threats and decided that 20 years after the fact, it just wasn't worth the potential danger to herself and potentially loved ones to go through in pursuing a case along these lines. Um, Segueing a little bit, a good example of this is Virginia Giuffre, who died, let's say, last spring. Myself, I believed that. I don't think that was a suicide. I think she was probably eliminated. A lot of people believe that. Of course, that's all conjecture on the part of those that weren't actively involved in the investigation, but I think that's just too convenient. And she had kind of made a life mission out of helping the Epstein survivors and being sort of the face of that movement. And as her father said, she simply had too much to live for. It didn't add up. She also had 3 children. I believe she, at that point, was estranged from her husband, and perhaps the children were with their husband, but I still find it too convenient, and I think that's very suspicious at best. I would just bring that up to drive home the point that this idea of being able to threaten and intimidate witnesses and potentially eliminate them is a very real one that doesn't exist only in Hollywood. And I think you can use that to explain why Katie Johnson would have from the public sphere and decided not to pursue this case against Trump and Epstein back in 2016. I would encourage anyone that's not familiar with the whole Katie Johnson allegations and case to Google that and give it a look. It is very troubling. I think some of the details and how she recounts her experience in those court documents responsible for the demeanor and personality of Trump, and also about the way in which we know Epstein operated. Um, None of it is overly creative or hard to come up with, but this idea of parties attended by those in the fashion industry being thrown by Epstein, him preying on his victims by through massages, and then kind of gradually escalating things. All of this is in her story, and all of this is the type of thing that came out 3.5 years later after she initially came out in the public in respect to Epstein in 2019, when all the details of his actions came out. Um, so that kind of sums up why I have changed my mind on all this, and I want to get into now where I think this is going, and it's not good. I think, in short, we're going to have a several year long saga that's going to play out, that's going to make Watergate look like child's play. The allegations here are far worse than what was at play in Watergate, And I think that, there's no Oval Office tape recording here of what Trump allegedly did in 1994 per Katie Johnson, possibly other instances that at least that we know of as of yet. And if there was, it probably would have matriculated into the court system by now, one would think. So it seems to me the way this is going to play out is we're going to have a several year long of all these various data points that get rolled out to the public. These recent emails are a good example where your internet sleuths and all these people that pour over these things are going to start connecting the dots. And sooner or later, it's all going to be circumstantial evidence against Trump. But there's going to be so many data points that present such a convincing and hard to refute large scale circumstantial evidence picture that basically without any concrete evidence he's going to be guilty in the eyes of the public, with not just having social ties to Epstein, but certainly knowing of his depraved activities and also having partaken in them to some degree himself. Um, and I think this is going to take a long time, and he's going to fight it tooth and nail because he's an egomaniac. At the end of things, I see this going on for about 2 years, and I think that he will never resign. He won't pull a Nixon. I see him being the first president removed from office. I do see that. I think he's going to be impeached a second time, and I think he's ultimately going to be removed. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene resigning as she did a little over a week ago, I don't think that that was any small thing. I think there were a number of reasons for her doing so, but one of the biggest was that she has become privy to some of this information that we're going to start seeing drip out. I wonder if these ties to Bannon that have come out recently were kind of the last straw for her, where she decided, okay, there's too much here. He is hiding things, and I can't be associated as one of his former utmost cheerleaders. I can't be associated with him anymore, that being Trump. And I'm disgusted with this whole thing, and I just have to resign. I think that was a large part of what was behind her actions. I also think that she felt that it was a good time to check out because her stock was kind of high. She could paint herself as sort of this anti-establishment figure that had just gotten into a row with the president and come out on top because they did successfully passed the bill to get these files released. And that's important to her because I do believe she wants to run for president in 2028. So checking out when her stock was high, I think was very a prudent move for her. That kind of ties into Bannon. I think he might be sort of the key here in this circumstantial evidence that I see coming out, that it's going to be hard to refute Trump's and criminal involvement with Epstein. Steve Bannon is a very peculiar figure. He's actually very similar to Epstein in that he's the type of person that if you look at his biography, you're kind of like, why does he have his finger in all these different eclectic pies? It just reeks of like someone that's in intelligence or the shadow world. Steve Bannon was in the Navy. He was at the Pentagon. While he was at the Pentagon, he went to got a master's degree at Georgetown in their Foreign Service School. I mean, and then he was even like the director of Biosphere 2, which is like this, I think it's called a vivarium out in Arizona that is very famous. It's sort of like this closed ecosystem that they constructed about 30 years ago to try and study um, the effect, like a closed ecosystem, so they could try to study how things work on an ecological level, with the implications being for how to create like a biome on Mars or other planets. And then I think they also started dabbling into using it how to research climate change and environmental issues. But I mean, he was involved in that, and then he was high up in Breitbart, which is an alt quote unquote alt right alternative news outlet. And then what we know in terms of Epstein, what has come out recently is that he was literally exchanging emails with Epstein to be like a PR strategist for him to try and rebrand himself and rehabilitate his public image. Uh, and this is the person that was Trump in his first campaign, his chief strategist and part of his administration for the first 7 months. Very, very bizarre, at to say the least. And in these emails, as we have seen, it's very clear that Bannon knew Epstein's background and the full, at least a lot of the extent of his depravity, and was trying to rehabilitate him rather than, bring him to justice. So, looks very, very bad on his part, to say the least. One also interesting thing I saw the other day was, I don't remember if it was Bannon or Epstein that said this, but in their exchange, they said something to the effect of he must hate the fact that that we are close friends. That being that they both have dirt on him and could potentially bury him if they want to. So, one thing that, and this is a big one, why I couldn't in my own brain piece together, well, if Trump is sort of guilty of wrongdoing in this, why has no one come forward and squealed on him before? That being Epstein himself. There's hours and hours of interview with him talking about Trump both before and after his arrest. Why wouldn't he call him out on this when he's being asked about Trump specifically, particularly after people social circles, apparently they did have a falling out in about, I think, 2004 over a real estate deal in Palm Beach that Epstein thought Trump kind of conned him on, and that was when they cut ties. So there was bad blood between them. Why wouldn't he throw him under the bus? What did he have to gain from sort of protecting some of these things that he knew about him? And so that was one key element of this that I couldn't square, and it wasn't adding up. And it occurred to me over the course of the last week that many people that believe Epstein was intelligence, they believe that if he was not full on Mossad, he was certainly sort of an access agent working probably for numerous factions, but primarily Israel. And if you're an access agent, as the term implies, your job is to sort of rub shoulders with people and develop connections. And also a large part of that is to, if you can, back them into a corner, i.e. blackmail or something along those lines, where you have the leverage in the position and you can get them to go along with things that you want them to go along with and do your bidding for you. And so it's very plausible that Epstein would have developed this sort of relationship with Trump. Maybe some of their relationship was indeed organic in that they were kind of buddy-buddy and pals and sort of wingmen, let's say, in their women escapades or whatever you want to call it. But also, it very likely served the double purpose that Epstein had with a lot of these other ties that he had with famous and powerful people, where he was cultivating a relationship with them because they could do his bidding for them. And this is where I came to the realization that Trump is arguably the most pro-Israel president ever. Israel has been wanting the U.S. and the West to do something about Iran for a very, very long time. Um, you could say that that's justified and a common sense geopolitical strategy on their part, and I think I would fall into that camp. But the fact of the matter is that nothing had been directly done against Iran until this past June, when Trump finally decided to bomb installations. You can go back to the first term of Trump when he rolled back some of the nuclear program for ostensibly, nuclear energy that Obama helped Iran phase in, and when he rolled back some of the sanctions against them and let them start developing a peaceful nuclear energy program. And Trump was always adamantly opposed to that and rolled that back. He pulled out of that agreement. Likewise, he also, of course, famously orchestrated the Abraham Accords, which was probably the largest the biggest international move in the sort of, let's say, legitimacy in the international eyes of Israel since the late 70s with the Camp David Accords. It was a huge move. Initially, I believe it was the UAE, Bahrain, and Morocco, I think, that came forward and formally acknowledged the state of Israel. In short, Trump has been made very good moves for Israel. And it's interesting because if you listen to some of the survivors of Epstein, some of even it has come out in these emails, his, well, particularly on the survivors note, they say that he kind of had a belief in Jewish superiority, that the Jews were better than everyone else. Now, that's just, he said, she said, but this is what some of the survivors have said. And also in these emails, it's very clear that he has a very pro-Israel foreign policy viewpoint, and he wants to have the U.S. and anyone able acting in the interests of Israel. So to me, I think Epstein kind of had an ends justify the means mentality on this and a big picture viewpoint on this. He had tremendous interest in seeing uh, things done on a strategic level internationally that played well for Israel. And as long as Trump was doing, in his eyes, these things, he wasn't going to squeal on them because it kept a pro Israel person in the White House. And it makes me also wonder if um, Trump was a little bit sort of strong armed into doing some of these things because, particularly now in the second administration, I have thought it bizarre, as many people have, the true leverage and power that Israel seems to have in this relationship. I heard someone once say they are the dog walker in the relationship, and I think that's a great way to put it. It doesn't add up on paper. We obviously are so many factors larger in terms of economy, population, military strength, virtually every metric, and yet they really seem to be calling the shots in the relationship, and that just doesn't. There's something odd there that doesn't add up. I don't think you can chalk that all up into Zionism or the evangelical Zionist right lobbying power. I think there's more to it than that. And all of this would explain some of that. I mean, just the other day, like Syria, I believe it was 1 or 2 days ago, the IDF goes into Syria, and I'm assuming this was in the Golan Heights. I didn't actually look into this, but into Syrian territory, and they kill 13 people, some of whom are women and children, of course, as always, under the guise of, fighting some sort of terrorist faction. But, that's just more infringement on nation sovereignty. And this is only weeks after al-Shara, I'm not sure how you say it, I think it's al-Shara, the new Syrian president, is in the Oval Office the day before Veterans Day, hobnobbing with Trump, and they're acting like they're best buds, and they're trying to form this strong relationship. And then 2, 3 weeks later, Israel's, got boots on the ground in his territory, killing people. Or they're bombing Beirut and, taking out Hezbollah people. I mean, whether you agree with those operations or not, and there could be, good reasons for them, is sort of beside the point. The point is that there's this constant um, infringement on their part on all these surrounding countries' sovereignty that frequently would seem to not play into the interests of the U.S., and yet we continue to back them and sort of, protect them, which goes back to this tenet of them being the dog walker in the relationship, which doesn't add up on paper. So, I think that is the rough general outline of everything. It will be very interesting to see how much more about Bannon is unearthed. I came across a clip just the other day of Bannon on stage. I believe it was from this summer when there was this initial blowback about when the DOJ said that there weren't any files, there was nothing to see, they weren't going to be releasing anything else. Bannon was on stage with Charlie Kirk, of all people. I think this was in Tampa, Florida, talking to a crowd of people, basically kind of urging them and egging them on to, you know, light this populist fire, to not stand for that, not be complacent, to continue to urge the government to release these files and to not settle for that. And someone that's able to go on stage and kind of go through the antics of that while they're sitting on hours and hours, lo and behold, of interview footage that they did with Epstein themselves, let alone all of their personal communication and knowledge on the subject that we have hence since found out here in the last few days, is someone that is a con artist and a charlatan, and would kind of go along with this line of thinking that he's intelligence because he's just playing the public. He's a liar. He's sitting on hours and hours of interview footage, and he had a strong personal relationship with Epstein, and he's up there shouting through the bullhorn for transparency on the part of the government when he's, being perhaps the least transparent person in the entire saga. So, that just really kind of sums up the type of person that he is, I think. And once they start peeling back the onion on him and all of his, if we ever do get to see the footage of these interviews that he did, that also will be very interesting. But in short, I think there's going to be a lot more that's going to come out, and it's just going to be too many data points. There's going to be too many incriminating things. And I think at the end of it all, it's going to sink this administration, and Trump is going to be removed from office. I think that's going to take several years, and we're going to be in for one hell of a soap opera. But I think that's where this is going. So I believe that is all for now. We will continue to pay attention to this and see where it goes. But thank you for watching. As always, it's not fake news, it's faux news.